Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the 90th verse from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel TN Thai in the USA. For him who has completed the journey, for him who is sorrowless, for him who from everything is wholly free, for him who has destroyed all ties, the fever of passion exists not. When this sacred verse appears in the radiant treasury of the Dhammapada, it shines like a tranquil moon rising above a night filled with wandering clouds. The Buddha brings forth these words to guide beings who are endlessly moving through the landscapes of birth and death, beings who often do not know where the road begins and where the road ends. When we hear this verse, our hearts can gently awaken to the quiet truth that freedom is not a distant land, and peace is not a treasure buried beneath countless lifetimes. Peace is simply the natural fragrance that rises when the fires of craving have been extinguished. Freedom is the gentle breeze that flows when the knots of attachment have been untied from the heart. The Buddha speaks of one who has completed the journey, and though these words appear simple, they point to a path that is profound. The journey is not about distance. It is not measured by mountains climbed or oceans crossed. It is not found in the number of scriptures memorized or ceremonies performed. The journey the Buddha speaks of is the inner crossing, the deep path where the mind walks through its own illusions and quietly lays them down. When the mind is still, the journey dissolves. When understanding blooms, the traveler is no longer bound to the road. In this verse, the Buddha also describes the one who is sorrowless. This is not the sorrowlessness of someone who has never tasted pain. It is not the emotionlessness of one who has blocked the world from reaching the heart. Instead, it is the sorrowlessness of one who understands the nature of all phenomena. Such a person sees that everything arising is conditioned, and everything passing is natural. Joys come as flowers blooming in spring. Sorrows come as leaves falling in autumn. When wisdom is present, the heart accepts both without being shaken. This is the sorrowlessness the Buddha speaks of, a sorrowlessness that does not deny suffering, but transcends it. The verse continues with the teaching of one who is wholly free from everything. This is freedom from the grip of desire, freedom from the nets of clinging, freedom from the heavy burdens of opinions and judgments. It is a freedom that cannot be taken away because it is not created by external conditions. It is not born from praise, and it is not destroyed by criticism. It does not increase when comfort arises, and it does not decrease when difficulty appears. It is the freedom of a mind that is awake, the freedom of a mind that knows itself, the freedom of a mind that no longer chases after shadows nor trembles before storms. The Buddha then describes one who has destroyed all ties. These ties are not ropes around the body. They are the subtle tendencies that bind the mind to the cycles of becoming. They are the ties of craving, the ties of ignorance, the ties of pride, the ties of fear, the ties of the illusions we weave about ourselves and others. When these ties cut deeply into the heart, they shape every thought. They color every breath. But when mindfulness shines, when insight opens like a lotus after long rain, the ties fall away. The one who sees clearly does not need to pull or struggle. The ties dissolve naturally, like frost melting at dawn. The Buddha concludes with the teaching that the fever of passion does not exist. For such a person, in this world the fever of passion is not only sensual desire. It is every craving that burns inside. The craving for comfort, the craving for approval, the craving for recognition, the craving for possession, the craving to be someone. These cravings rise like flames, and with each flame comes heat. With each heat comes restlessness. With each restlessness comes suffering. But when the flames are cooled by wisdom, when the fires of desire have no fuel left to consume, the fever settles. The heart becomes like a calm lake touched only by moonlight. In the ancient commentaries of the Dhammapada, This verse is often connected with stories of the arahants who walked the path before us. One such story tells of an elder monk who, after many struggles, finally attained complete liberation. When he reached this state, he walked with a serenity that could not be disturbed. Even when the villagers saw him resting in the forest, or walking slowly toward the river, or sitting quietly beneath the shade of a tree, they sensed that his presence carried a gentle coolness, as though the fires of worldly desire had long faded from him. He said that completing the journey did not mean reaching a final destination in the world, but finding unshakable clarity within. He said that sorrowlessness did not mean avoiding suffering, but walking through it with compassion. He said that freedom did not mean escaping life, but embracing it with understanding. And he said that destroying the ties did not require force, only wisdom. The villagers listened to him with reverence, for they felt that each of his words carried the fragrance of truth, and each of his breaths was in harmony with the Dharma. This story echoes the meaning of the verse. It shows us that liberation is not something reserved for a chosen few. It is the natural unfolding of a mind that practices with sincerity. We may not become arahants today or tomorrow. We may not extinguish all the fires within us in this life or the next. But each step toward mindfulness is a step toward cooling the fever. Each moment of compassion is a moment of loosening the ties. Each breath of understanding is a breath that brings us closer to completing the journey. When we listen deeply to this verse, it becomes a mirror for our own hearts. It asks us, what ties are still binding you? What passions are still burning within you? What sorrows do you carry as though they must be carried forever? And it reminds us that these burdens are not permanent. They are not who we truly are. They are only conditions arising and passing. When we see this clearly, the path begins to open beneath our feet. When we walk it gently, the journey slowly completes itself. When the Buddha speaks of one who is wholly free, he points to the deep reality that true liberation is experienced as an inner spaciousness. This spaciousness is not measured by the absence of people or noise, nor is it dependent on comfort or possessions. It is a freedom that arises when the heart no longer clings to what it cannot hold, when the mind no longer chases after what is fleeting. In the story of the monks who attained this state, we find countless examples of this freedom expressed in the ordinary rhythms of life. One monk would rise before dawn, walk slowly along the forest paths, observing the dew upon the leaves and the birds greeting the morning sun, and he would notice the impermanence of all things. Nothing belonged to him. Nothing could be grasped. And in that seeing, he felt a joy that was gentle, enduring, and without disturbance. The people who witnessed him walking or sitting beneath the trees sensed a calmness that was contagious, a serenity that did not depend on circumstance, and they were inspired without a word being spoken. This story illustrates the profound nature of freedom that is not external but wholly internal, cultivated through mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Each action, each thought, and each breath becomes a practice in releasing clinging. In this release, a quality arises that is described as sorrowless, because when the mind no longer identifies with its cravings and attachments, sorrow no longer roots itself firmly in the heart. It may appear as rain falls on the earth, but it cannot flood the inner being, for the foundations of peace are already established. The Buddha's words encourage us to recognize that the journey to this state is not separate from the journey of everyday life. Every moment, every encounter, every thought presents the opportunity to let go, to release, to experience freedom. The path is not a retreat from the world, but a transformation of how the mind engages with it. Just as the monk in the forest moves through the world without being ensnared by it, we too can practice cultivating awareness that frees us from the fever of passion. Each time desire arises, it can be observed without reaction. Each time attachment tugs at the heart, it can be noticed and released. And in these small, repeated acts of recognition and letting go, the ties that bind gradually dissolve. The story reminds us that this is not an instantaneous accomplishment, nor is it granted through luck or divine favor. It is the product of patient, consistent practice that aligns the heart with the truth of impermanence, the truth of suffering, and the truth of non-self. In the monastic accounts, we also find that even those who had once been overwhelmed by passions and aversions were able, through repeated practice and guidance from the Blessed One, to cultivate equanimity and insight, the same qualities that seem out of reach for beginners. The serenity, the sorrowlessness, the wholeness of freedom can arise when the mind is trained to notice without clinging, to rest in observation without judgment. The Blessed One's teaching emphasizes that this journey is universal. It does not discriminate based on status, past deeds, or intelligence. Anyone who dedicates themselves to the factors of enlightenment, mindfulness, investigation of phenomena, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity, can gradually realize the cessation of the fever of passion. The story illustrates that there are no shortcuts, no magical transformations, only the gradual unfolding of insight through sustained effort. As the monks in the stories faced the challenges of both internal agitation and external conditions, they learned that sorrowlessness does not mean escaping difficulty, but embracing it with awareness. When challenges arise, the awakened mind does not react with fear or clinging. It observes the arising and passing of conditions with clarity, knowing that these are natural and impermanent. In this way, the fever of passion, which once disturbed the mind, has no power to disturb it again. The verse also teaches the importance of detachment, not as a cold indifference, but as an engaged freedom. One who is free from all ties is not rejecting life or turning away from the world. Rather, they are responding with clarity and compassion without being trapped by desire or aversion. Their relationships, their actions, and their thoughts all reflect understanding, not attachment. In observing these stories and reflections, we can see that the Buddha's teaching offers both an ideal and a practical guide. The ideal is the full realization of sorrowlessness, complete freedom, and the cessation of all ties. The practical guide is the cultivation of mindfulness and the factors of enlightenment in each moment. When the practitioner consistently returns to awareness, each thought, feeling, and sensation becomes an opportunity to practice letting go. Slowly, the mind begins to experience the spaciousness that the verse describes. In practical terms, this means observing desire when it arises, noticing the subtle craving for recognition or comfort, and letting it pass without feeding it. It means noticing anger or aversion and allowing it to dissipate rather than grasping onto the story it creates. It means practicing generosity in thought, word, and deed without expecting return. In this careful, gentle cultivation, the heart begins to experience sorrowlessness. And when sorrowlessness arises, the mind is no longer inflamed by the fever of passion. This is the living meaning of the verse, that liberation is both possible and present here and now, not as an abstract ideal, but as a direct experience that anyone can approach with effort, patience, and mindfulness. Through the examples in the Dhammapada and the stories of the monks who walked the path, we are reminded that the heart's freedom is not an external acquisition, but an internal transformation. We do not need to change the world outside to find liberation. We need only to practice clarity, patience, and wisdom within. And in doing so, the fever that has burned through so many lives gradually ceases, leaving the mind cool, spacious, and luminous. As we conclude this reflection on the 90th verse of the Dhammapada, let us rest quietly with the understanding that liberation is not distant or impossible. Each moment presents the opportunity to observe the mind, to release clinging, and to cultivate insight and compassion. As the verse teaches, the one who has completed the journey, who is sorrowless and free from all ties, experiences the absence of passion's fever. This is not an abstract ideal, but a living reality accessible to all who practice sincerely. Let us take inspiration from the stories of the monks who walked the path, and let us carry this understanding into our own lives. Each mindful breath, each compassionate action, and each moment of letting go contributes to the unfolding of freedom and peace. Thank you for watching my video. Namo Amitabha. I wish to bring this merit towards all disciples and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.